So we skipped 6-2 because today we're talking about using properties with rational numbers, and it expects you to know what the distributive property is, and you guys didn't, so we need to learn about that. And then 6-2 we'll come back to before Christmas break if we have time, but if we don't, it's not a huge deal in my opinion. So the problem says, the first problem, Orlando works part-time at a moving company. He earns $12.75 per hour. He works 4 hours on Friday and 7 hours on Saturday. Use the distributive property to write equivalent expressions showing 2 ways to calculate Orlando's total earnings. So, like I said, it's important to write out the important stuff. So he earns $12.75 per hour, 4 hours on Friday, 7 hours on Saturday. You should probably write that information down. So here we go. We have 2 different amounts of hours. We have 4 hours and we have 7 hours, okay? He gets paid $12.75 per hour no matter whether he's working Friday or Saturday. So we're going to set up the distributive property. 4 times $12.75 is what he gets paid Friday. 7 times $12.75 is what he gets paid Saturday. So yesterday we talked about grouping numbers together in parentheses. So he makes $12.75 an hour no matter what. But then we have 2 amounts of hours he works. So in parentheses we're going to put 4 plus 7. Okay? And then like we learned yesterday, we have $12.75 times 4 plus, because there's a plus sign right there, $12.75 times 7. And $12.75 times 4 is 51, plus $12.75 times 7 is 89.25. And then we have to add those up, and we get 140.25. This says to show 2 ways, so we're going to do that. The next way is to simply use exactly what we just have, $12.75 times 4 plus 7. But instead of using the distributive property, we're going to go back to using order of operations, where we do $12.75 times 11, and then we multiply those and we get $140.25. Okay? So, when you have 2 numbers that apply to the same thing, that's when you know those are the numbers that go into the parentheses. The next one. I feel like in this lesson they took you from 0 to 90 in about 2 seconds. So this one is writing an equivalent equation for 1/3 x minus 4 equals 2/5 that does not contain fractions, and then solve the equation. So, first step. Number 1, find, oops, that looks funny. Find the common denominator and in this case your denominators are 3 and 5. Okay, so we have to find the common denominator of 3 and 5. So that is 15. Okay? Then we're going to multiply each term by the common denominator. So how we do that is we take 15 times 1/3 x minus 15 times 4 equals 15 times 2/5. All right? And then we have 15 times 1 over 3x minus 15 times 4, which is 60, equals 15 times 2, which is 30 over 5. But remember, does not contain fractions, so we're going to take that a little step further. 15 divided by 3 is 5x minus 60 equals 30 divided by 6, or 5 is 6. Then we're going to solve this equation, okay? The first thing we're going to do is move constant, which in this case is negative 60, to right side. Okay, so we have 5x minus 60 equals 6. We know to move negative 60 from the left to right side, we have to do the opposite, so we have to add it. So these cancel, and we get 5x equals 66. And then you know how to do this part. You just simply divide by 5. These cancel, and x equals 66/5, or 13 1/5 if you change it to a mixed number. I think they'd make things a little bit easier on you in 7th grade. So, let's do one more of those. We'll walk through the steps. We have 2/3 x minus 9 equals 3/4. So we need to find the least common denominator of 3 and 4, which is 12. So we multiply each term by 12. And then we actually multiply 12 times 2 is 24 over 3x minus 108 when you multiply those equals 12 times 3 is 36 over 4. Then we go divide our fractions. 8x minus 108 equals 9. Then we move the constant, which in this case is negative 108. So we add it, because that's the opposite. These cancel, and we get 8x equals 117. And then we divide by 8, and x equals 117 over 8, or 13 1/8, I believe. Because 12 times 8 is 108 plus another, yeah. Okay, let's see, we might have one more problem to do from our examples. Yep. So Maxine is replacing a 14.25 meter row of wood floor. She has already placed a strip that is 0.75 meters long. How many 1.5 meter strips of wood does she need to finish the row? Write and solve an equivalent equation without decimals. So, we know that each of these strips of wood is 1.5 meters, but we don't know how many she needs. But if we knew how many she needed, we could take 1.5 times that number, and it would give us 14.25 meters. So, 1 what the heck? Alright. 1.5 times an undetermined amount of wood strips is gonna get us to 14.25. However, she has already placed 0.75. So we're gonna add that because we want 1.5 times an undetermined amount plus 0.75 to equal her total of 14.25. Okay? So we got our equation written out. Now to take the decimal out, which is a little confusing, but not too bad. To take the decimal out, you count to the right. We have 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. So we count all the digits to the right, and the number with the greatest number of digits to the right is how many places we move the decimal in each term to the right. So this has 1 decimal to the right, this has 2 decimals to the right, and this has 2 decimals to the right. So since 2 is the biggest number, we're going to move each term's decimal over to the right 2 places. So in this one, to move it over twice, we have to fill the empty with a 0. When we move this over twice, it just becomes 75, and when we move 14.25 over twice, it becomes 1,425. Now that doesn't change the value of your numbers because you did the same exact thing to each term. So then we just go through, and here we move constant, which in this case is 75. And it's positive, so we subtract it from both sides. And these cancel, and we get 150x equals 1,350. And then you know from proportions, the next step is to divide by 150. And these cancel, and x equals 9. So she needs 9 more 1.5 meter strips of wood. And now if you want to do another problem, I'm going to do number 21, which is in your homework. So if you want to pay attention, you get one of your homework questions done. So Tony spent $50.35 on office supplies. He bought markers for $3.80 each and an organizer for $19.95. How many markers did Tony buy? Write and solve an equivalent equation without decimals. So it's another one of those without decimal things. So he bought an undetermined amount of markers. So since we know it's an undetermined amount, we're going to put an X by it. Plus he bought an organizer for $19.95. And we know that his undetermined amount of markers plus his organizer equaled $50.35. Then we go through and we count the decimals to the right. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so we have 2, 2, and 2, which means we're going to move the decimal to the right 2 places for each. So we have $380x plus 19.95 equals 50.35. And now we move the constant of positive 19.95. And we do the opposite, so that means we're going to subtract 19.95, and these cancel, so we get 380x equals 35 minus 19.95, 3,040. And then you know from proportions that we are going to just simply divide each side by 380. And you get 8. So he bought 8 markers. There you go.